Okay, here we go. Welcome to This Week in Tyranny. It's show 150. It is a special show, very important. Of course, it goes without saying. I kind of can't believe I'm doing this. I keep switching up my setup, but this is it. This is finally my final setup. It's going to work one way or another, so we're going to go straight into it because it's going to be a long one. I want to show you a lot of things. We're going to look into an article from The Atlantic. It's going to be the featured story. I also want to talk about what happened today. We're going to talk about what's happening right now as we speak still. Let's see, what episode is it? 150. It is October 18th, Saturday night, 2025, of course. So I'm your host, Konrad Rogoz. Let's get right into this. My website is truthandlaw.com. The One Great Work Network is where you will find the whole archive of the entire show from 1 to 150. It's the only place that hasn't given me any issue or banned me or like censored me yet. So there we go. So what do I call this show even? What is it? It's kind of like same shit, different day. Is what I was going to really do the show about before I saw the Atlantic article that we're going to talk about, which is called America Needs a Mass Social Movement Now. That's the title of it. And before we get to that, I guess the big topic of the day is the No Kings protests all over the country. They're all over the country. People are protesting against Trump. We had the original No Kings protests in June, and it went off without too much issue. And for what happened today, this is still going on. Now it's 9:43 p.m. Central, so not much is going on now. It started to rain. But let me switch over, and before we do anything else, I want to... I actually have to do this, do a little bit of moving around. Two screens, it's alright. We are up and running. Here we go. So you can see now my top videos. Ice makes huge mistake in Chicago, and the Panthers, who lost today. Again, they've lost 4 in a row now. That's alright. So let's talk about the protests. We're just going to type in protest and see what we get, right? No Kings protests erupt across the United States. Now you see these are news results, so we don't want to see the news. We want to see something like this, this is a guy doing live coverage. Do we want to look at that? Maybe.
I'm either. What is he doing?
Turn down my mic.
It was like a crumpled up something.
Our agents are gonna get suicidal thoughts for
I don't know.
people. They're gonna get to know how.
Okay, I think he found
Karen
a...
Bass is LA. Right here, this is Karen Bass won't say anything.
Okay, so let's go back now. Now he's sitting still. Don't go there. Don't go to LA. Why not? This is in Los Angeles. We have Portland and Los Angeles.
That's interesting now because when I was looking at all of this, I tried to see what's going on in Chicago, right? So I go Chicago protest live to see what happened in the city where I live, of course, right? This is about the armed federal agents clashing. This is 13 hours ago. This is older, actually. If you want to look at what happened today, it's something like this. It's this. You see, I've already clicked on this. You see a crowd of people, a lot of people. Like they said, 250,000 people were here. And it went off without a hitch. Now, I did see in Los Angeles... they at least went to the federal, like a federal building, so there were a lot of cops standing there. But the main takeaway from all these huge protests that happened all over the country, they were saying 100,000 people in Boston, 250,000 people in Chicago, and no arrests. Not a single arrest was made. The reason I point this out is to not say... The reason I point it out is to say that events like this that go off, you get that many people and everything goes off without a hitch. There are no incidents, no violence at all. It means two things. One is it's well funded and well organized. Because I've been an organizer at an event that was not well funded, and it was, I can say, not well organized because I was one of the organizers, right? I'm talking about SoundPath. So I know how many things can go wrong when you get a lot of people there. Or, it's also about who's interested and for what reason, who's involved. But we have to say that it's about your level of organization, your abilities to organize events. These people know how to organize events, right? So this isn't just a grassroots movement. Everybody who's upset about these things that were going on in the streets of Chicago, like me, this isn't just a bunch of guys taken to the streets. This is well organized. This is well coordinated. That's one thing. The other side of this is that it actually does show how powerful people are. I have to say this, even though I see the crowds of people and I'm thinking like, on one side I kind of wince, I kind of cringe a little bit, because I can see that there's a lot of, that this is very well organized, and that this is not a real protest, but it's a very controlled one. It's one where everything is boxed in and nothing is going to get out of control. That's one side of it. But I have to say, this is a powerful showing just of humanity, because the one thing about this, I'm going to switch back to it. Now, of course, the exception to this was LA and Portland with that guy, and you saw cops there. But even with those cops there are no incidents. And you see this here. Where are all the police? Where are the batons? Where's the tear gas? Where's the rubber bullets? There are none of them. And that is because they clearly left these people alone. They walked through downtown. Really, these weren't protests. I call this the No Kings Parade. This was a parade. You look at the Puerto Rican parade or other things that go down like a festival, it looks just like this. The people go about their business. Actually, there's a bigger police presence at festivals. I see no police presence here. And we can look at some other videos, you know. Now, also, you could say, well, you have to think about what the coverage is showing, because maybe there was violence and we don't even know. We won't find out about it until tomorrow, until 2 to 3 days later, right?
And we've been.
Let me not spend too much time. No offense to this nice lady over here. Let me not spend too much time on that. What I want you to take out of this is that this was a parade. This is not a protest. They clearly let them do it. So if they really didn't want people to go to the streets, if they thought these people were a threat, it would have gone differently. We're going to talk about that a little bit. But at the same time, this was a powerful showing of humanity, because even if the military wanted to go in and squash and extinguish this protest, they could not do it. Good luck trying to get in front of 200,000 people. If they would have sent those people with those masked men with the zip ties and the rubber bullets, those guys that were shooting at people outside the Bridgeview facility, not far from where I live, if those people would have been there, they would have gotten crushed. They would have gotten destroyed. It wouldn't have been as pretty, and it would have really been something. So it didn't happen. So they let them go, right? In a funny way, this is actually good PR for Donald Trump, because he can now say, all this stuff you've been saying about me being authoritarian, look, everybody, we let them protest and nothing happened. But that's a minor point in all this. I think the more major point is that this is actually a good showing of people do not need to be governed in an authoritarian way. They can do just fine without police. This is a great showing of what anarchy looks like. It's not violence and stealing and looting like we see during some protests, right? This makes you think about who's organizing the protests and why. Because you had certain kinds of protests and there's rioting and looting like right away. And here you get 200,000 people and nothing happens. Nothing happens. So, if anything, this is showing how people can actually act when they're not being assaulted, they're not being provocateur. So, all in all, it was a good day, right? You don't want to hear about a lot of violent clashes and deaths and arrests. So, good. I go into it in a good mood, right? My salute and congratulations to everyone who went out and spoke up in whatever way they do, right? At the end of the day, I can't be too harsh on the masses, right? We're talking about the mainstream. We're talking about 200,000 people. So I can hardly expect them to go out and profess, moral principles and give a crazy speech that is going to galvanize the people. I'm going to attempt to do that, right? I'll do my thing. I'll let them do theirs. But the people showed up, and I'm glad to see nobody got hurt. Okay, that's the news, really. There are a few things. Let's get into this that I was going to talk about before I found this article that you may be seeing now. Oh, no, you're not seeing it. But the article is, like I said, America needs a mass social movement. So it's all on topic, right? We're talking about the same thing. Some of the other things I saw this week were same shit, different day. Like, there's a global panic now over the rare earth minerals and about China and the minerals they have, the uranium, the superconductors, whatever it is. I've heard it before. It's just panic. Panic that one bad actor is going to get their hands on something that we need here in America or Poland or Europe or whatever. And so people panic and they demand action. They're like, oh my goodness, the world is going to end. We're going to have war, whatever it is. I always think it's bullshit. It's just like the invisible enemy terrorism or the war on drugs. I've heard it all before, and now people, all this does is just galvanizes people to think collectively, to support some kind of massive national action against a superpower like China. Good luck with that. This is Cold War type propaganda and mentality, and all it's going to do is just make life worse for you. And whatever you thought the threat was across the ocean, it's never as big as the threat right outside of your door. That's your government. The second story that I saw, I gotta stop calling them stories, right? They're not stories. The events that I want to comment on are the attacks by American armed forces on Venezuelan boats, Venezuelan ships, that they're calling drug boats, right? But think about what this really is. They're killing people. They're bombing someone. This is like if you are driving a car down a street somewhere in another state, or even driving international, and somebody kills you and blows up your vehicle. They have killed these people and blown up several ships, several boats, and then the story comes out that these were carrying drugs, right? That they were carrying drugs, and that's it. That is put out as a justification. I think it is nuts that anybody buys that, because there are so many assumptions along the way. The assumption that drugs are even on board. Okay, maybe there are. What's wrong with drugs, right? People have to, it doesn't matter if they're illegal. At the end of the day, this is something like this. This is a bottle of enzymes, right? And this is a drug, because it is YouTube gonna take down my video? I know people are like, they'll be smoking a joint. They're scared to show it on the stream, so I don't think that'll happen. But anyway, I just showed you a bottle of enzymes. That is an ingredient that, taken in, it has a desirable effect that I want, and it changes the composition of my body. Well, cocaine is the same thing. It has an effect that people want, and it changes the composition of the body. Or whether you want to say positive or negative effects, that can change. They used to say cigarettes were healthy for you. They'll say this, they'll say that the next day. The bottom line is nobody can tell you what to take into your body or not. So it's nuts to attack someone who's just carrying drugs, because it's not wrong to be a drug dealer. It's wrong to do things like steal from people, and then when you're selling to children and women, and you're destroying their lives. That becomes, I've been a drug dealer. I know I was a piece of shit. I know, but that in itself, transporting, just operating the vehicle that's carrying drugs, right? That's an assumption that guy is the drug dealer. Anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on this either. But this is crazy. And then the biggest assumption is that this somehow is a threat to Americans. Like the American military is doing this. But really, that's nothing new. Again, this is the same shit, different day. They sent people to Vietnam, to Korea. Like, people died. People had so many people had, so many people killed themselves because of Vietnam. And what was they were saying that somehow affects America. They actually got people to buy this, and they continue to do it. And people will continue to kill people abroad for the military of whatever country they're from, especially the American military, which I have called the guard dog, the attack dog of the world. So same shit, different day. There also was a cop from a neighborhood not too far from mine, Hanover Park. It's a suburb to the west. That man was arrested by ICE, and he was a cop for however many years. Turns out that he overstayed his visa and he was actually illegal, right? And this was a big deal. How was this guy? It was a big deal on both sides, right? Because on one side they're saying, look at this guy, he has a family here, he has a job, he's clearly an American, he's a cop, and even they're gonna take him away. The other side is saying, how is this criminal allowed to have a gun? And they actually made a lot of points that I agree with. Like, these people, what makes them qualified to? These are the same people that are waving a gun in your face, demanding your papers, your driver's license, and asking you how many you've had to drink. And as funny as that is, I agree with that. In a funny way, it actually points out the immorality of policing in the first place. You know, he was unqualified because he was an immigrant. I think they're all unqualified, because who is qualified to make moral judgments of if this person is supposed to be deprived of their rights or not, and thrown into jail and pay all these fines, waving a gun in somebody's face and keeping them in a state of duress. So yeah, they made some good points. But this is same shit, different day, as far as the idea of replacing the old institutions with a more authoritarian, aggressive type. I've talked about this throughout the last 2 episodes, about the parallels between what's going on today and what went on in Nazi Germany, with the Sturmabteilung being replaced with the Schutzstaffel, and that replaced, and then the Gestapo, and more aggressive, secretive, satanic levels of policing in Nazi Germany in the 1930s. But I almost had to say that to get it out fast, because I realize so many people are drawing those parallels between Trump and Nazi Germany now. So I really don't like that. I kind of enjoyed that when I thought that I was one of the only people talking about that. But now that I see people on the street that they talk during these protests saying that, now I feel like, oh, okay, you guys got this. I'm gonna leave that now. You know, I want to be ahead of the curve. So we're going to get into that and go into this article from The Atlantic. America needs a mass social movement. Now, this is from this week, 4 days ago. If you're watching my mouse and wondering why I'm such an idiot, it's because I have 2 screens, but they're not. It's not really to the left, or it's like left, right, but they're really, one is up, one is down. So anyway, okay. I'm not drunk, I'm just, my cursor is moving a little bit drunk. So, America needs a mass movement now. This is the article. And if you scroll down and look at this, you'll see that you can only read a few paragraphs before you are asked to subscribe to The Atlantic, to buy some kind of a subscription, or try 30 days free. Register an account. And I got no problem with people putting their stuff under a paywall. I have no problem with people making money. Make your money, really, no issue with anybody. But I also don't think there's anything wrong with me getting this article for free, and I'm going to show you how to do that now and get around paywalls. So this is the link here. You're just going to copy the link. You should be seeing me do this. I'm going to open a new tab and just go to archive. Okay. And down here, this is archive.ph, right? You could look this up. There's also the Internet Archive, which is different than this. And here, down here, this blue box, I want to search the archive for saved snapshots. And I'm going to paste that link and search it. And hopefully it works, because this is what I did to get it. And here you have a couple, right, from different times. So I'm going to go to the earliest. And now this is, you see an archive of a version of this article. And when you scroll down, there is no paywall. So there we go. We can read this now, and we don't have to pay these people. I got no problem with them putting their stuff behind a a paywall whatsoever, but I also don't have to do it. And this is not stealing, because when you write something and publish it, you're putting it out there. It's just like putting a table out there, and if it rains, you want to put your stuff under an umbrella, but if it gets rained on, it's not like the rain spilled into your house, down your wall, into your room. You went out there, you put your stuff out there. If you can control the software and all of the infrastructure to get your stuff, to keep your stuff exclusive, by all means. I will look at this, because there's no such thing as once you publish something out there, you don't own it anymore. This is a controversial take, but that's where I stand on intellectual property. Once you put something out there and I hear it, it's not yours anymore. It's mine. You know what I mean? I can reproduce that, right? I could have taken a picture in my mind and rewrote this and did the same picture. Okay? So that's how I feel about that. Now let's go and read this article. America needs a mass social movement now. Other people have risen up to defend their rights, their dignity, and their democracies. In the past 50 years, they've done it in Poland, South Africa, Lebanon, South Korea, Ukraine, East Timor, Serbia, Madagascar, Nepal, and elsewhere. I find it interesting that he starts with their rights, their dignity, and their democracies. Because rights and dignity... Now, this is a guy from The Atlantic, right? So this is a leftist, really mainstream leftist newspaper, right? Some of you may have already rolled your eyes that I'm reading from The Atlantic. But talking about people defending their rights and their dignity, I fully agree. And those are indeed the values of importance to me. That's what's truly important. So let's go on. In the early 1970s, for instance, the democratically elected leader of the Philippines, Ferdinand Marcos, tried to centralize power in his own hands. Students rose up. A clash between them and police left 6 protesters dead. Transit workers went on strike, followed by joint student-worker demonstrations. Marcos countered by declaring martial law. Led by Cardinal Jamie Sin, the Archbishop of Manila, Catholics arose to resist. So they give the example of Ferdinand Marcos in the Philippines, and indeed, this is the pattern. He talks about students and workers coming together and that overthrowing tyranny. That's exactly what happened to overthrow communism in Poland. That's exactly what happened, and I looked into some of that, because even though I'm from there, I don't know the history of this time period too well, only from things I've heard, right? But everyone knows that the fall of communism in Poland is known for this alliance of the working class, the coal miners, all these guys. People were fighting in like little pockets. They were rebelling for many, many years, but there was no allied movement until they came together with the intellectuals, with the students, okay? And when those two forces were aligned, that is really when communism went down and things started changing. Okay, this is around the 1980s now. But it started with the 1976 strikes, that kind of an alliance. And what happened at that time is the Soviet Polish puppet government, they announced an increase in food prices, which is inevitable, the inevitable consequence of a command economy, right? Of course, they're going to have to raise the prices because they're not producing things, because they're not doing free market, because they're trying to tell people what to do. So people aren't working to their most productive. Don't get me started on the economy of Soviet communism, because it was a joke. They increased food prices, and that is the price. The financial consequence for a lack of freedom is shortage. So of course there were shortages under any command economy. Just like in biology, the consequence for a lack of motion is death. The consequence is death when you don't allow motion. In the economy, if you don't allow motion, which means transfer of resources, transactions without taxes, if you don't allow that, then you're going to get shortages and your economy is going to die. So what happened at this time is the factory, the railroad, the power plant workers, they all went to City Hall. Now this is 1976. this kind of kicks things off where it really gives rise to the solidarity movement. But what I found out, and this is thanks to my mom actually, that kind of schooled me on a little bit of history, because I didn't know that actually in 1968 was when the original protests were the students. They were the students, and it was actually a folk theater play, an event, an art event that was at first going to be shown live in a theater, but it was taken down by the Soviet puppet Polish government, because it's a play Adam Mickiewicz. It's a folk play. It's an old Polish identity type of a work. I mean, the book, I think it was a series of books, maybe 2 or maybe 4. I looked into it a bit because an interesting story about that, but I won't go into that. But anyway, this was going to cause, if they allowed this play to happen, this kind of an art inspires people. These are the kind of things that inspire rebellion, that inspire people to aspire to better things. So they took it down, and the students got mad as hell, and they went to the streets. But of course, by themselves, they didn't accomplish much. So they continued to do what they do. The young people just growing up. There was the demonstration here and there, but in 1976, now there were the big demonstrations of the workers, because the workers are dealing with such bad conditions, and they don't have enough to eat. They're barely living and surviving, and then they're going to raise food prices when the whole system is not working. So you had this in a few cities. In Radom, it was the most violent. You had 44 people die there, actually. One day I'm gonna have to talk about the number 44 actually in Jade, where Adam Mickiewicz does some gematria, according to me, and there is a piece about the hero of that book, saying his name is 40 and 4, and this whole idea of the number 44, and that from biblical times all the way through Polish history, but that is a story for another time. So you had a really violent debacle in Radom, and they stormed City Hall. And it wasn't like the storming of our capital. They actually made their grievances known. They came out and they demanded the food prices that food price increase to be retracted. And then the official leader at the City Hall, he actually came out and he said he wouldn't negotiate with a mob. And infamously, they stripped that guy down to his underwear and left him like that, right? So they meant business, but it wasn't just a publicity stunt. This was serious. And so of course they called in the police to deal with all these people, the militia, right? At that time it was just the police. It was like the paramilitary Soviet militia, and they ended up arresting anybody whose hands were dirty, which I found an interesting tidbit as I was researching some of this, because this is not innocent until proven guilty. This isn't even you were at the scene. This is guilt by association, just by the way you look, which is what happens to a lot of the Hispanic people. Anybody that looks brown in Chicago has to be afraid of getting picked up by ICE, citizen or not. Meanwhile, a guy like me is walking down the street chilling, just because my hands aren't dirty, to use the same analogy, right? So I wanted to include that. But these June 1976 events, they for the first time brought together workers and the Polish intellectual opposition. I found this through a Polish article that I was reading. It's actually very hard to find information about this kind of stuff. I'm saving everything that I can. Anyway, the intellectuals, shaken by the plight of the helpless demonstrators, decided to help them legally as well as materially, since many people were dismissed, fired, and had no means to support their families. So this is when this alliance was forming in 1976 now. And I, reading this, thought, hey, history repeats itself, doesn't it? Because I read a story this week about a group of young Americans, activists. They were buying out. What they do is they're buying out the food stands. The elote, the tamales, okay, the taco stands, the fruit people selling all the fruit and stuff, right? They go out there and they pay them. They basically buy all their stock, so they don't have to stand out there all day and be targets for immigration enforcement. So they get to go home to their families, and these people who, don't have to worry because they're white Americans. Then they go and they distribute all the food throughout the community. So I thought that was a really cool story of community action and community building. This is and these are just people helping each other. Let's not euphemize it. This is the best about humanity. This is the kind of shit that people do, and this is the kind of shit that Americans do. Americans are always get the reputation for being selfish, for being all sorts of things, all sorts of negative, the worst of popular culture. But what Americans actually are is they're fucking helpful. I've never seen things like that where you can get a flat tire in somebody's neighborhood and pull up on their driveway and people are coming out with tools ready to help you. I mean, that's not the world that I came from. I remember being introduced to some of this stuff, and I'm just like, wow, there are some kind, like, good people here. I used to think at the time, this is back when I was younger, I used to think, man, these people aren't like me, because I'm kind of, it's not that I was raised in it so much, although Poland was like this, but my mentality was always like ghetto mentality. I was like, oh, don't talk to that person, don't trust that person, and I think that's how it is in a lot of parts of the world, especially in Europe and the old world, because it's not only North America and the United States, it's also Latin America. From everything I've come across, they're the people that are helpful too. Mexico probably even more than the United States. Now they won't only fix your flat tire, man. They're gonna feed you. They're gonna show you family photos. You're gonna sleep. You could sleep at their house for a week, And I'm not even joking. I mean, you guys, this is true if you had to do it this. But I just want to make a side point while I'm just taking a little bit of an aside to talk about these protests in the 70s. The ruling class of the world has learned from the failures of Soviet communism. So they will never again announce price increases like they did here. It's never going to happen because of how people react to it. But food prices increase again, and it's the same shit that they did here, except the euphemisms now. Nobody admits that the government is doing this, right? But you got all these euphemisms. Supply chain breakdown, supplier issues, tariffs, reciprocal tariffs. What is a tariff other than controlling the economy through a proxy, right? It's like putting a bunch of traps on a string and pulling one, and then this one triggers that one, and that one triggers the other one. It's still you causing the action. It's just like the price increase, these tariffs. And then, of course, inflation. People talk about inflation like it comes out of nowhere, like it falls from the sky. No, these are just government actions. You know what's going to happen. None of this is a mystery. Monetary policy is very easy to see what it's going to do. So that will never happen again. But we are living under this command economy, and we are watching the Soviet takeover of society all over again. And I've been talking about the Nazi comparisons between Nazi Germany and Trump, but I've realized that it's actually that he's more like Stalin than Hitler. It's actually a lot more Stalinist, and we're going to talk about that, okay? So in 1976, they actually tried to launch this propaganda campaign. The government, they were running all these news stories. And I'm stressing this because this is what is happening today. And they say this now, when you can read, the purpose of the campaign was to show the nation that the price increase was a necessary step caused by similar trends in world markets. See, they always blame the markets. It's never their decision, it's just the supply chain. In early June 1976, Polish press, both national and local, began printing news about rising unemployment in Western Europe and North America, as well as rising food prices in the capitalist world. So they ran the propaganda story about the economy is collapsing everywhere because of the supply chain. That's not what they said, but that's what we are told today. The rare earth minerals, right? The minerals, the mysterious minerals from China. I'm not dismissing that, but at the end of the day, I don't know. How many people do you know in China? That you can ask what's actually going on. All we know is the propaganda stories. We're not that much different from Soviet communist Poland. Everybody has a phone, but you can't access Chinese internet. Not really. And they control it, so you may be able to access it, but you're only accessing the things that they filtered out of that country. So the 1980s, 1976, these demonstrations, they kind of get the glory, right? But there were more revolts in 1970. We're going a little bit further back. This was called the December Revolt. It was also called the Coastal Massacre, the Masakra na Wybrzeżu. And this is, again, they announced increases of food prices, and things were even worse back then. And you had people really lose their mind over there. And I'm saying that here is where the 44 people were killed, so it wasn't in the Radom, right? But I did point out the 44 there. So it turned violent. You had resistance, okay? But nevertheless, the workers from the coast, they did not prevent the government from implementing its goal of increased food prices. That was only achieved a few weeks later, after the 1971 Łódź strikes. And they were strikes about the food prices as well. But of course, this is like in February, so this is like 6-7 weeks after all those dock workers in the northern coast of Poland, they got killed, right? They protested, and these people in Łódź, they were all women. That's what makes it spectacular. The strikes that actually got the food prices pulled back. They actually had to pull back on their decree. It was done because of the women that were sewing, the seamstresses, the textile workers, the clothing makers. In February 1971, they actually got the communist government to withdraw the price increases because the communist government at that time had no choice. Because the women said no. They said we refuse to work. They had meetings, they just stopped at the machines and they sat there. They wouldn't do it. And they said, we're hungry, we can't afford food for our children. And that really forced them to do something, because the optics of it, they couldn't just kill these women. They're not doing anything violent. It is so powerful what women can do, all because women refuse to work. This was changed. Imagine that happening today. No fucking way would it happen today. Never would women today strike at their workplace. Women worship their jobs. They worship the workplace. And that's probably the harshest thing that I've said about women in 150 episodes. But this is the one thing that I can hold against women. You worship the workplace. It has taken over as your god, okay, for most. So anyway, we're like 40 minutes in, and that's the first 2 paragraphs of this piece, right? So let's pick it up now, okay? So he's still talking about Marcos in the Philippines. In 1983, Marcos' key opponent, Benigno Aquino, was assassinated. Marcos banned TV coverage of Aquino's funeral, but 2 million mourners showed up for what turned into an 11-hour rally against the regime. The middle and professional classes then joined the protesters. The Manila business community held weekly demonstrations. The following year, there was a general workers' strike. After Marcos stole the next election, members of the armed forces began to mutiny. Millions of ordinary citizens marched to defend them. The Reagan administration threatened to cut off aid to the regime. By early 1986, Marcos and his family had no choice. They fled the country. It had taken more than a decade, but the people had defeated the autocrat. Such uprisings are not rare. For their 2011 book, Why Civil Resistance Works, the political scientists Erica Chenoweth and Mario Stefan looked at 323 resistance movements from 1900 to 2006, including more than 100 nonviolent resistance campaigns. What Chenoweth and Stefan showed is that citizens are not powerless. They have many ways to defend democracy. For the United States, the question of the decade is, why hasn't a resistance movement materialized here? I've talked about that. The second Trump administration has flouted court decisions in a third of all rulings against it, according to the Washington Post. It operates as a national extortion racket, using federal power to control the inner workings of universities, law firms, and corporations. Pause to show you what I'm reading. Corporations, law firms. One second. I mean, I'm showing you this. I might as well zoom in, right? I'm sorry for the interruptions. I'm going to get better as I continue to do the show this way. Anyway, here we are. It has thoroughly politicized the Justice Department, launching a series of partisan investigations against its political foes. It has turned ICE into a massive paramilitary organization with apparently unconstrained powers. I'm highlighting the things that I'm seeing like, damn, that's exactly what I said. It's spectacular. It's kind of amazing. So, paramilitary organization with apparently unconstrained powers. It has treated the Constitution with disdain, assaulted democratic norms, and diminished democratic freedoms, and put military vehicles and soldiers on the streets of the capital. It embraces the optics of fascism and flaunts its autocratic aspirations. I think that's a really good point, that to say that it embraces the optics of fascism, because it's not that this administration is as bad as it seems. The story is, it seems that bad. It looks that bad. It embraces the optics of it. That's very well said. So let's keep going. I am not one of those who believe that Donald Trump has already turned America into a dictatorship. Me neither. Yet, the crossing over from freedom into authoritarianism may be marked not by a single dramatic event, but by the slow corrosion of our ruling institutions. This is the first of many giveaways. Like giveaways in terms and word choice that I'm going to talk about in order to point out what's going on in the world. And I don't mean like in politics now, not the economy, but in the minds of the people, in mass psychology. I'm going to point out some of these words he's saying and what this guy thinks, who I think he is based on what he writes. But here I want to show what are the opposing sides here. What are the battle lines being drawn? And him saying ruling institutions is my first giveaway, my first indicator of what we're going to see, right? Because when we read an article, we're not just reading what the person is saying, we're reading the person. You got to read the person, right? Unless you want to be propagandized. So let's keep going. Ruling institutions, and that corrosion of the ruling institutions is well underway. For 250 years, the essence of America's democratic system, drawing on thinkers going back to Cicero and Cato, has been that no one is above the law. Public officials' first duty is to put the law before the satisfaction of their own selfish impulses. That concept is alien to Trump. Selfish impulses. Here it is. This show should really end here, because this is the key mistake for the resistance against the government. People are showing their resistance, but they're putting this all on Donald Trump, the man, the person, his personality, his psychology. Okay? Now, the real reason that Trump is president right now and acting the way he is right now, it's not that this is a narcissist that's gotten out of control and he just wants to look out for his guys and he's an Epstein guy and he's a typical guy that ran loose and took control of the country. That's not why this has happened. He's president in order to put the nail in the coffin for any respect for masculine leadership. That's what it is. The classic qualities that died in the last century of real men. Because we don't have leaders in big institutions anymore. We got leaders today, but they're like in sports. Like, there are a lot of leaders, but they're the guys who are fighters in the cage. They're the players. They're the coaches. They act like men. They're people of integrity, at least in what we see of them, right? There's going to be a handful of those people, like a local sheriff, a professor here and there, an old-time business owner. He runs his business the way he runs it, and nobody's going to tell him different. That is a old-school breed of man that is near extinct. And it's not to romanticize the past, because I also think there were a lot of pieces of trash in the past, okay, that wore the suit and the collar, and they just looked like they were respecting men, but they weren't. But there was such a thing as a respecting man, true masculine man. Is Trump that breed of man? Absolutely not. He is not. He does not inspire respect for masculine leadership with the way he acts. He doesn't represent those traits. But we all mentally associated with certain qualities, important ones, important qualities. And the ruling class knows that. The people who pull the strings of Trump, they're in the business of breeding these qualities out of human beings. They need to breed certain qualities out of existence. And I don't mean to say it's just masculine, because it's not, but they want to make the American leader, who is the symbol of masculine leadership, has been for a long time. The ultimate alpha male is like the leader of America, right? They want to make him look so unlikable, so ugly, so clumsy, so repulsive, so that nobody will want to have those qualities. Nobody will want to live those qualities. What qualities am I talking about, right? Saying what's on your mind, even if it's not politically correct. That is like a traditional male thing, right? That guy just says what he wants, and you may not like it, but he is who he is. The second thing is have some pride and confidence. Having some pride, some ego even, right? Having a disrespect for authority and institutions is the third thing. So not just deferring to what everybody else is doing or what people have always done in the past. This is the trailblazer type. It's like, okay, I know what everybody else is doing here, but I think we can do it differently. I hope you're seeing why I call these traditional masculine qualities. It's not that women shouldn't be like this. It's just traditionally this has been the thing, right? So disrespect for authority, what I mean by that is like confidence and common sense. Confidence in your own mind, that you're not just going to defer to somebody just because they've been working at the federal office of aviation or whatever it is for 30 years, just because they got 30 years on the job, or they have a row of medals or hold some official position. You're not just going to assume they're right just because they've been there that long. Because true experts, they can explain what they do. They can explain their craft to an outsider. They don't hide behind this wall of jargon and this wall of mystique about what they do. A true master of his craft is going to show you his cards. He can tell you his next move because he knows what his ability is. Well, our mainstream institutions are not that. They're not that. They actually, there are scientific studies that the scientists don't want to do. They don't want to release them. Like the documentary they did. It's called The Inconvenient Study. The movie just came out this week. Actually, it should be on this episode. And this Inconvenient Study is one they did where they just compared 1-to-1 raw vaccinated versus unvaccinated people, a certain population. And of course, what they found, that one group was a lot healthier. One group had a lot less diseases, a lot less hospitalizations, a lot less chronic illnesses, and the other one had all those chronic illnesses. Guess which one's which, right? Episode 148, I was going to talk about this. The tendency of academia and research towards censorship, that these scientists are actually holding back knowledge, when science is supposed to be all about releasing knowledge freely. And whatever the results are, that's what we do. They're supposed to be the opposite of religion, right? That whatever the evidence says, that's what we go based off of. No bias, no faith. That's what it was supposed to be now. And what I was going to talk about in the last episode, I'll go to it now. This study that came out. Let's see if I can find it. Strengthening nucleic acid biosecurity screening against generative protein design tools, which doesn't tell you a lot. But what this did is this sounds the alarm on the need for secrecy when it comes to genetic sequence information. They're actually trying to censor the actual genetic sequence because it comes out that AI can alter those sequences, allegedly, and they can allegedly create bioweapons that could fall into the hands of terrorists, right? And bioweapons can be made. I think you can tell. I think that's bullshit. I think they just want to put more distance between them and the people so that there's more knowledge exclusively for the expert class. They have more power, and so you can never call them out or ask them, hey, what the fuck are you doing over there all day, you know? Because they can hide behind public health and safety. I didn't talk about that on episode 148 because instead I talked about the atmosphere of fear and arrest and tyranny in the streets. I walked up and saw the videos. But if I did do that, then I would have shown this as well. I'm going to go to my next tab, if I can find it. WHO. This is from the WHO, an archived, as you can see, the Wayback Machine, an archived WHO news release, World Health Organization, from 2012 that they took down in 2021. As you can see, this is from November 29th, 2021. That's as late as it goes. That's when they took it down, even though it was up for 10 years. And this, what this is, the title of this is Public Health Influenza Experts Agree H5N1 Research Critical, but Extend Delay. Now this delay, this is about not publishing any research about the H5N1 flu, which is the bird flu. It's about keeping the bird flu secret for the people's good. Somehow it's supposed to be for the people's good. Let's see. WHO convened the meeting as a first step to facilitate the discussion of differing opinions that have arisen in recent months after two research groups, one in the Netherlands and the other based in the United States, have created versions of the H5N1 influenza virus which are more transmissible in mammals than the H5N1 virus that occurs naturally. Consensus to delay publications. This is what they reached, a consensus to delay publications. Delay is a bullshit word, a useless word. Remember when they said 2 weeks to slow the spread? What they're saying is censoring the publications, not releasing the publications, keeping the publications secret until they say so. The group also came to a consensus that delayed publication of the entire manuscripts would have more public health benefit than urgently partially publishing. So they weren't even thinking about publishing the whole thing. They're like, either we're going to censor it and like redact it, or we're just not going to release it at all. So they didn't release it, which I would agree is the better of the two choices. It's a joke, but here you see they're talking about biosafety and biosecurity. Of course. This is one of the things that they want to do. Well, so I didn't do it in episode 148, but I just did it now. Maybe this week in Tyranny should really be 10 minutes long like that, and I don't have to go on for hours. Even though I want to, especially this episode. It's a big 150 show, you know. I'm not rushing this one. But on this subject, if you want to see Del Bigtree's documentary, it's actually, I think he's the executive producer, but not the director. Sorry for forgetting the director's name, because I want to shout him out as well. But anyway, here it is, in inconvenientstudy.com. You can type this in, and you can watch this movie about that study. Here it is. So, shout out to them, doing good work. The scientific community, just like Trump, is controlled on a string by the ruling class. The health and the science experts, they've been calling for secrecy. They don't want their profession to be placed under the microscope. That's the thing. While the Trump administration, on the other hand, they've placed everything under the microscope, starting with Doge. With Elon Musk and the whole government efficiency thing, right? They were looking at USAID and all the federal funding and bureaucracy. Then they went to RFK with being the head of the HHS. They're going to come in and they're going to get to the bottom of autism, right? They're going to get to the bottom of food quality and fix everything. What a joke it is, you know? And now they've got this whole dynamic, the Trump administration, with the colleges and the universities. See, this is the part where it starts to look like Soviet Russia, because this is what the communists did. They went into all these. They went into every single factory, into every single business, into every single aspect of life. And they said the old way, they didn't know what they were doing. This is all the bourgeoisie class, right? And the proletariat, we know what to do. We're going to fix it. So that's what they did. And then, of course, they couldn't fix it. They didn't know what the fuck they were doing. Now, what am I talking about with the colleges? Here it is. Here are the colleges rejecting Trump's funding compact. There's a funding compact, okay? This is 9 universities were sent a memo from the federal government at the beginning of October that guaranteed funding advantages if the institutions agreed to certain policy changes. The 10-point memo, titled The Compact for Academic Excellence in Higher Education, gave a variety of sweeping demands, from changes in hiring admissions, altering campus culture, and shrinking foreign student enrollment. So basically, a lot of these schools, they were given an ultimatum from the government to get in line, basically, to fall in line, or they're not going to get funding, right? They started fucking with their money, as is said, right? Anyway, you look all this, and you start to really buy it. You start to buy it because there is real conflict between all these parties. These schools are really saying no to him. There are people that this affects. There are people getting fired. I mean, it's not all a puppet show. But what you don't see is that the result is the same, no matter who's going to win. Everyone involved is pushing for the removal of true and good human qualities. And when I say everyone, I'm not talking about the dean of whatever school or the admissions guy, right? In general, the people who are in these positions that are on this chessboard, they are going to destroy true good human qualities, not just masculine traits. These are strong human traits now, right? But they are masculine because the male leader has historically been the symbol of them. I'm getting distracted by Trump here because it autoplays this for me, and you see this guy. Look at this guy, John Sununu. No, don't look at John Sununu. What I wanted to show you is this guy Donald, what he looks like. How can a person look like? I'll show you who he looks like. This is an exclusive. You're not gonna see this on any other show. I mean, has any other human being looked more like Jar Jar Binks? I mean, seriously. This is it. I tried to figure out for the longest, like, what is going on with the eyes and this whole thing. This is it. It's Jar Jar with the little bugged out eyes, you know. This is exactly it. What a joke. Anyway, not to be distracted by that, we'll go back to me. The male leader, especially of America, has always been the symbol of these qualities, and I'm going to repeat them in different words, and they're just a few of them, right? These aren't all of them, but these things that are going to go away because the guy that represents them to a degree is such a fucking idiot and looks like Jar Jar Binks and talks like an idiot. These qualities are going to go away. The following. The first one was speak up. Speak up and don't worry about what others think of you. Don't hold yourself down. Don't bite your tongue just because you're afraid of somebody laughing at you. Say something even if it's an unpopular thing to say, right? Trump will do that. It's just unfortunate that the things that come out of his mouth are very low. They're very low quality thoughts, right? But that is a good quality, to actually say what's on your mind. It's just good when the thing that is on your mind is actually original or productive. And that's one. The second one is have some ego. I do believe in having some ego. There's such an anti-ego sentiment. I think this is pseudo-spiritual bullshit. I am a big proponent of ego. My ego allows me to put a good quality self forward, because I do care about how people see me. I do get attached to things that I do, like doing this show, and I get attached to people who are close to me, and I don't want to fucking let them down, man. I don't want to let you down, so I take the time to, put good shit into the world. And I also have ego when it comes to, like, if I walk out in the street, and somebody tests me, right? Somebody's tested, and I'm called to stand up for principles, and I may be feeling, like a bitch that day. I may not be, so I may just be wanting to go home. I don't want to be part of this, or I don't want to answer this phone call from somebody that is relying on me and talk to them for an hour and deal with it, but I do it because I have ego, because I have to be able to look myself in the mirror and justify the way that I see myself. My ego actually helps me be a better person. And I don't see that. I don't see people saying that. But that is a good quality to have. Now, Donald Trump has a lot of fucking ego. Of course, the problem is I don't see him living with, character and integrity. But this idea of holding your head high, being sure of yourself, very good quality. We need men like that. We're losing men like that. You're going to get a bunch of soy boys and hipsters. Even more of them, right? And the last quality is, don't defer to something outside of yourself just because that's the top dog in the field, right? Don't automatically yield to seniority, to tradition, to expertise. Be sure of yourself, right? Anyway, back to this Atlantic article, because we're not even close to being done with it. Selfish impulses, which is sweeping revolutionary change, is really what they're talking about, right? The things he's implementing. Versus ruling institutions, which would be like traditions, the experts, the experienced. Those are the battle lines that are being drawn. Okay? And they were actually the same battle lines with the Bolshevik Revolution. It was the same. The original communism under Lenin and later under Joseph Stalin, it was actually very similar to this, to going against the established institutions. A brand new novel thing going against the institutions that were proven to be inept. So they took them down, and they stormed the Tsar's palace, right? And they took over the economy. They took over all the land. And this little crusade by the Trump administration, this cleanup mission, they're going to sort out the bureaucracy. They're going to fix the food practices. They're going to take over production and get rid of all the inefficiencies in government, like with Doge. That's all classic Soviet communism. Throw out all the experts and put the party guys in. No knowledge, no experience, no knowledge of the job, but you get these guys, RFK. Just look what they look like. I'm not saying what they do. Look at them. Look at Kash Patel as this FBI guy. He's a big-eyed guy. He looks like a deer in the headlights. This is the FBI director. Pete Hegseth is the Secretary of Defense. He looks like an extra in an NSYNC video. And the same kind of things that they're doing, like, is very socialist. Tariffs. They're saying we're going to stop the exploitation by all these external powers, and we're going to look out for each other. This is what the government is saying to us. We're going to fix the economy and look out for America, right? America first. Actually, they're just taking money out of the people's hands. So they implement the tariffs, which is a command economy, socialist type of a thing. It's not capitalist. It's not a negotiation tactic. It's a socialist nationalist thing. Putting these people who have no experience, who have no they are clear outsiders and simpletons in the field, Catherine, what's her name, Levitt. I mean, she looks nice, but this is, they just put them in. They just put in their guys, and we're in charge now. I'm the captain now. And also the last thing that I haven't really talked about, that it's very communist, is this idea that nobody's safe, because that is kind of the feeling. There's an atmosphere that nobody's safe. Everybody's job is on the line. Everybody's productivity is being reviewed, right? That's the government efficiency thing. everyone is under the microscope. And if you don't perform, if you're not useful to the people's great America, then you're gone. We don't need a trial in court. We're just going to have people come and take you. Like, take the guns and do the due process later, right? That is a quote from Donald Trump, right? They don't care what the judges say, because they can go around the process. And it's not that I agree with the old traditional institutions. I don't. I'm trying to be, in my mind, I've already seen this play out before. So I know that the institutions, they were set up to fail. And then this revolutionary socialism is also set up to fail. And the institutions will take over again. But I'll say it again. I've said it a few times, like this episode. MAGA is socialism, and it's Soviet communism. I've connected that government to the Nazis historically, but they're actually looking more and more like the Soviets, which just punctuates that crucial point that both the Nazis and the Russian communists, they were both socialist. It was all socialist. Socialism meaning anti-true human values. That's what I mean by socialism. I'm not talking about looking out for the homeless. I'm talking about being against true human progress. That's what socialism is. Let us move on now, okay? Although Trump's actions across these various spheres may seem like separate policies, they are part of one project, creating a savage war of all against all, and then using the presidency to profit and gain power from it. Trumpism can be seen as a multi-pronged effort to amputate the higher elements of the human spirit, learning, compassion, science, the pursuit of justice, and supplant those virtues with greed, retribution, ego, appetite. Trumpism is an attempt to make the world a playground for the rich and ruthless, so it seeks to dissolve the sinews of moral and legal restraint that makes civilization decent. If you think Trumpism will simply end in 3 years, you are naive. Left unopposed, global populism of the sort Trumpism represents could dominate for a generation. This could be the rest of our lives and our children's too. So, once again, they're identifying it with Trump the guy. Identifying it as the cult of personality, right? That he's the problem. It's the rich and ruthless. It's him. The sickness is he. When the real disease is not he, it's not me. The disease is we. Collectivism is the true disease, and it's collectivism that is dominating the Trump administration, actually. So he says, the author, why are we doing so little? Are we just going to stand in passive witness to the degradation of our democracy? By this past spring, Trump's actions had become so egregious that I concluded that the time for a mass civic uprising has arrived. I agree completely. On April 17th, I published a column in the New York Times arguing that all sectors of America needed to band together to create an interconnected resistance coalition. That column got an enormous amount of attention and support. For a moment, I thought the mass civic uprising I was hoping for was at hand. So where is it? Yes, there were the very good No Kings rallies in June. No Kings parades, he means. And yes, groups such as Indivisible continue to organize conventional progressives, but for the most part, a miasma of passivity seems to have swept over the anti-Trump ranks. Institution after institution cuts deals with the Trump administration extortion racket. In private, business leaders will complain about the damage Trump is doing, but in public they are lying low. University presidents were galvanized by Harvard's initial decision to stand up for itself, but many other schools, including now possibly Harvard, have agreed to pay what are in effect compulsory bribes to the Trump administration. So, him pointing out this miasma of passivity, it's absolutely right. The people, they talk a whole lot, but I see them as actually being very soft, even especially in the institutions, right? The intelligentsia of today is a lot softer than the intelligentsia of 1960s and 1970s Poland. Okay, those guys were willing to die, and they were just kids. These guys, not so much. But I appreciate the writer of the article pointing out the hypocritical, timid nature of the people. And now I have to say something concerning this. Put the camera on me, right? I'm the one doing it. So A lot of you that are over 50 and 60 years old are guilty of this, because your retirement increased under Trump. And I don't want to go into those details of that, and no taxes on it, but the bottom line is that the old people of the world are fueling this wave of tyranny. And most of the support for this government and for the status quo of today is the old people. You grew up, people that are, we're talking about 50 and 60 and up, or approaching that. You grew up in a world full of life and vitality. It was still the old world. It was before social media and Facebook and all this. Okay, I know. And as it was under attack, I'm talking about in the 80s and 90s, you handed it over. You went toward comfort and convenience and away from all true human values. You presided over the degradation of this world in the late 90s and into the 2000s. The degradation of the world, especially America, especially you in America, have done this. And your children now have pledged their loyalty to the collective, right? They're the millennials, right? Because you didn't prepare them for the anti-human values propaganda. You didn't prepare them because you never learned how to talk about human values. You knew human values, you lived by them, but you took them for granted. So you never prepared them. And now you become conservatives. Not by worldview conviction, but by default. That's who you are. Because you never had any convictions to begin with. You just went with what was pleasant and what was popular. And as America turned into a shopping mall, you showed up with your cotton candy and your pretzels. Okay? There's a real George Carlin-like rant that I'm going on, okay? But it's I wanted to say this. This is my letter to a majority of Americans over 45 years old. Okay? You did this. You made this world how it is today. You created the mass mental psychosis generation of your children. I hear a whole lot of talk about this, the generation, the youth. How the fuck do you think they got to be what they are? The incompetent generation, the phone screen generation, the headline and soundbite generation. You created them and raised them, and you're gonna ride in the backseat now as they work themselves to death for less and less money into a world of tyranny that you have led them into with no protection. And in your dying moments, you will choose the state over the future of your grandchildren. Because that's what every generation does in the end, at the end of the day. It's not just you guys. So I got nothing against my parents, because this really doesn't apply to my parents in the way, like, that's not what makes me go on this rant. I don't have any like problems with what anybody did to me, but I have big problems with what is happening to the kids around me, to the people around me, and especially I got a problem when one of you motherfuckers that's pushing 50 and 60 tries to talk about the world like you know what's going on, or you have some, or I should defer to you. It really pisses me off, because I think that's very accurate what I just pointed out, how it came about to be how it was. Anyway, back to the article. It is a very fun article. We are going to keep reading it. He says, we all understand the first reason many people and institutions have remained quiet: intimidation. Leaders say, if I speak out, it'll cost my organization millions. Acquiescence to the government begins to seem prudent. So instead of a mass movement, we have separate institutions, each drawing up a self-preservation strategy. In the absence of a broad social movement to support and protect them, leaders all face the same collective action problem. If I stand alone, I'll be crushed. The problem with this strategy is that it allows dominance to become a habit. Bullies who go unresisted keep on dominating. Submission becomes a habit too. One way to tell if you're living in an autocracy is by asking this question: do people feel free to express their dissent? I have to point out that with how many people went to the streets to express their dissent, you have to say at least America still has that, because that That many people could not go into the streets if the people truly don't have power. If they're truly stripped of their resources, they won't let them go into the streets like this. But on the other hand, if the government knows that the people are harmless, they'll let them purge. They'll even let them burn down the city if they don't care about it, right? So it could go both ways. Back to it. All around me, I see civic leaders not saying what's really on their mind. And over time, self-censorship can lead to internal spiritual and moral collapse. When Trump initially defeated the GOP establishment a decade ago, the conquered went along only grudgingly, maintaining their capacity to be privately appalled by him. But over the years, acquiescence appeared to have bled inward, and before long, they were conquered on the inside too. They have become the very people who not so long ago, they professed to be appalled by. And I just talked about that, actually, right? But a second reason people are so quiescent is that they don't understand the fight we are in. They're still thinking in conventional political terms. Every so often, a political, cultural, social tide sweeps the world, leaving everything rearranged in its wake. 250 years ago, the democratic tide swept across the West, producing the American and French revolutions and eventually the democratic revolts of 1848. The totalitarian tide of the early 20th century produced revolutions in Russia, Germany, and China. The 1960s gave us the tide of liberation, which produced the decolonization movements, the civil rights movement, and the feminist movement. The neoliberal revolution of the 1980s and 90s produced Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher in the West, and Deng Xiaoping and Mikhail Gorbachev in the East. Since 2010 or so, the tide of global populism has risen. A movement that has brought us not just Trump, but Viktor Orban, Narendra Modi, the revanchist version of Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, and Brexit. I resent this guy making me say all these names and make me trip up my show, but it's alright, we will read it. Drowning in this historic tide, conventional parties and politicians whose time and horizon didn't stretch past the next election are hapless. Conventional politicians don't have the vision or power to reverse a historical tide. Chuck Schumer is not going to save us. You know, it's one thing to read an article in your head, but it's another thing to read it live and realize how much time my viewers are wasting reading this guy's stuff. Because as much as I like this article, it's relatively so, it's very good. Yeah, sorry you have to sit through that. He talked about these historical tides, right? And I want to talk about this because it's brilliant, actually, what he's talking about. And all these historical movements he mentioned, they were all socialism. They were all anti-human values. Except, of course, for the American Revolution. And I've drawn this distinction before in the past that the American Revolution and the French Revolution were 180 degrees opposite. The only things that they had in common was this word right here, revolutions. And yeah, people did throw off the chains that they were under. But the French Revolution was very nationalistic. It was very violence in the streets. There was a row of executions, when the American Revolution was almost, it was moral, it was spiritual, and it was almost business-like. It was almost a business, like it was done so respectfully. We have a right, these are the rights, we have, this is because of our right to pursue human life, because of dignity. These are the rights, natural God-given rights. The Creator created man to be equal, and we have every right to split ourselves from, and we have no allegiance, we have no connections to the king. We are not a colony. We can govern ourselves, and they defined it. They made their grievances known. They gave the reasons. It was flawless. It was flawlessly done as far as the Declaration of Independence. As for winning the war, I'm not a historian. I wasn't there. I understand that the Americans had some help, and I understand that in war, not everybody's hands are clean. I also understand the Freemasonic influence of the Founding Fathers, so I'm not romanticizing that revolution, but this was a real revolution that was pro-human values, and the effects of that striving towards human values and willingness to die for true human values is still felt today with my ability to give you a show like This Week in Tyranny, and I don't have to deal with some motherfucker telling me what percentage of my paycheck I gotta give to him. Unless you're talking about the federal government, then they are telling me what percentage I should give them. It's not that easy for them. The French Revolution was a socialist revolution. They talk about the democratic revolts of 1848 as well. Now, the 1900s, I want to talk about this, the totalitarian tide of the early 20th century. You know, in Russia, you had Soviet communism, that's socialism. In Germany, you have National Socialism. In China, you kind of got a blend of the two, right? You really have like a hybrid. So socialism again, the 1960s, it was the oppressed demographics against the traditional status quo injustice, with the laissez-faire capitalists and the male patriarch being the casualty of that. See, that was actually, the 60s were the beginning of the breakup of families, unfortunately so. As much as I despise racism and as much as I love women to have a voice and not have to go to the kitchen if they don't want to, as much as I'm like personally aligned with all of the stuff from the 60s, but the reality was that was the beginning of the destruction of the black community, especially families. Women going into the workplace. Anyway, it was also, yeah, and enough about that. The 1980s and 90s, I just talked about this, right? These are the people that are 50 and 60 today. We had a neoliberalism there that was oppressed. The 1980s and 1990s were, it was like a complacent, quiet socialism. It had all the optics of individual freedom, limited government, right? I'm thinking about like Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher. But behind the scenes, what they did at the time is they filled the people with jails for drug crimes, things like that. They implemented censorship, like of rap music. They increased the taxes. They tilted the tables toward corporation. There was all this deregulation that was actually slowly driving the prices up and the wages down, the opposite of what the rhetoric was saying. And today, they're talking about this little MAGA alt-right revival, okay, Orban, Trump. He correctly identifies, as I have before said, the 1980, I've played the 1980 presidential debate and said how this role that Trump is playing, it's just like Reagan, except that he's not even close to being as good as Reagan, and that's kind of the point. These socialist waves have been more and more degraded throughout history. It keeps getting worse and worse. The leaders are less respectable, they're less believable, they're less inspiring. This is demoralization that Yuri Bezmenov talks about. And today's leaders are actually so pathetic that when the next populist socialist revival after Trump comes around, we will have President Camacho. That is a official prediction from This Week in Tyranny. We are going to have President Camacho. Let me introduce him to you. If you don't know who President Camacho is, you have missed out on one of the greatest movies of all times. So I will introduce you to that now. This is what the next president is going to act like and sound like.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of America! President Camacho! Shut up! Sit your monkey ass down. Chill out. Shit. I know shit's bad right now, with all that starving bullshit, and the dust storms, and we running out of French fries and burrito coverings.
Yeah.
But I got a solution.
That's what you said last time, dipshit.
I got a solution. You're a dick.
South Carolina, what's up? That's what I thought. Now, I understand everyone's shit's emotional right now, but listen up. I got a 3-point plan to fix everything. Number one, We got this guy not sure. Number two, he's got a higher IQ than any man alive. And number three, he's gonna fix everything. I give you my word as president. He'll fix the problems with all the dead crops. He's gonna make them grow again. And that ain't...
Hey, you catch that? He said he's gonna make them grow again. You know, this is 2006. For anybody that doesn't know, this is Idiocracy, one of the greatest movies. Real quick, this guy, the protagonist of this movie, he was like an idiot. He's just an idiot, and he happened to be frozen in time is the whole premise. And then he wakes up in like 100 years, and because of the degradation of society, he's the smartest man on earth, and he's like a everyday idiot, and he becomes this guy to fix all of the world's problems that the President Camacho is now rallying the people for.
I give you my word. He's gonna fix the dust storms too. And I give you my word. He's gonna fix the economy. He's so smart. He's gonna do it all in one week.
President Camacho stood before the world and promised everyone that Joe would solve all their problems. He would not only end the Dust Bowl and heal the economy, but he would cure acne and car sickness as well. And if he didn't, President Camacho made another promise. He would kick Joe's smart balls all the way up to the roof of his smart mouth, and then he would throw his brainy ass back in jail.
Yeah, exactly. So, see, it's funny, and by the way, I love the narrator, and it's funny, but it's actually deadly serious, because this is what the socialists did, is that they find their next savior after their plans don't work, and they say, this guy's gonna save us, and if he doesn't save us, we're gonna throw him in jail. We're gonna kick his smart nuts all the way up to the roof of his mouth and throw him back in jail, you know, as he shoots his machine gun all over the place. So anyway, that is President Camacho, who I will expect to see soon. Let's go back to this article and finish up. Although we're not anywhere close to finishing up. Trumpism, like populism, is more than a set of policies. It's a culture. Trump offers people a sense of belonging, an identity, a status, self-respect, a comprehensive political ethic. Populists are not trying to pass this law or that law. They are altering the climate of the age, and Democrats think they can fight that by offering some tax credits. To beat a social movement, you must build a counter-social movement. And to do that, you need a different narrative about where we are and where we should be heading. A different set of values dictating what is admirable, what is disgraceful. If we fail to build such a movement, authoritarian strongmen around the globe will dominate indefinitely. Will enough Americans rise up to reverse the tide of populist authoritarianism? Yes, they're going to replace it with institutionalist authoritarianism, is what I think is going to happen. The Filipinos did it under Marcos. One morning the autocrats woke up and were no longer in control. The marchers were. That needs to happen here. But what he's saying about a counter-social movement, I totally agree. Our identity, our set of values, you know, we have this, like the natural law community, this is what we try to build. This is what the One Great Work Network should be. You know, it's not just fighting what's going on in the world. It's within us. We need to create the community that shows what it's supposed to be like. I think the great work is about living it. You gotta live the philosophy. You have to be an example of the philosophy. You have to show people that what we're saying works. Individual freedom, moral objectivism, you know, the principles of love and will put into action, and very simply, just individuality over collectivism through a moral and spiritual cohesion, a togetherness. Okay, healing the mind. Healing the traumas within the individuals first, healing the mind, having a concrete, holistic worldview, and then going out into the world and implementing right action. That's basically what we need to be telling people. But I don't think we have it yet, like on the One Great Work Network, partially due to circumstances, right? Like there are a lot of things working against us. A lot of people aren't interested in this kind of a knowledge. We don't have the funding. But I personally think the natural law community is in a post-Mark Passio lull. He's kind of like the originator. Like if you're picturing like looking up on Wikipedia Greek philosophy, you're gonna get Plato and Aristotle and how it developed over time, right? It's like we have Plato, and right now it's just Plato. There's no next galvanizing personality, and truthfully, I don't think there's anyone advancing the philosophy in a serious way. Like really advancing it, and that's not to talk shit about anybody, including myself, right? Because we're all trying, but this is a new movement, right? You could talk about like early hip hop before it went mainstream. This is something that's in its infancy, okay? And we're talking about the kind of ideas that we get the most resistance in a time where there are a million ideas about a million things and nobody cares about anything, right? So, but there is no next philosopher or leader in this movement, and if there is someone doing it, I think some of you out there, especially my loved ones, I think you suspect who I think that up-and-coming person may be, right? But anyway, we'll see how things turn out, right? When we think of social movements, we think of rallies, protests, marches, but those tend to come at the tail end of a social movement. Rallies and marches are pointless if they are not done on behalf of an overarching ideal. Historical tides shift when there's a shift in values. We just talked about this. The mind has to come first. A group of thinkers conceives a new social vision, and eventually a social and political movement coalesces around it. John Locke and the other Enlightenment thinkers came up with ideas that made the Declaration of Independence and thus the Revolution possible. In 1848, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels created the vision for what became the communist revolutions of the 20th century. Friedrich Hayek, Milton Friedman, and William F. Buckley Jr., among others, created the vision for what became the Reagan Revolution. I'm really impressed with this section of the article that talks about the fuel behind, like the fuel in the engine behind the symbols of these movements. Everybody talks about Stalin, about Lenin, about Marx, Now there's even more to talk about with that, but correctly, this guy identifies the shift in values comes first. Thought, okay? Ideas in the mind. What became Trumpian populism drew on older movements, such as the anti-immigrant Know-Nothing Party of the 19th century and the isolationist America Firsters of the 20th, and then coalesced over the past 8 decades in the writings of people such as Albert J. Nock, James Burnham, Sam Francis, Pat Buchanan, and Christopher Lasch. Lash's 1995 book, The Revolt of the Elites and the Betrayal of Democracy, is to MAGA what Marx was to Lenin. Almost everything that Trump and J.D. Vance are saying today was said first by Lasch 30 years ago. The establishment betrayed the people and created a culture that makes the working class feel like strangers in their own land. These movements that he's talking about, honestly, I don't know them, so I looked into them just a little bit, and there's a wide range here. Like, but he's talking about Lasch, the revolt of the elites. Yeah, that does make sense to me, because Lasch was saying that the elites are like the professional class, like the top 20%. The top 20% is not the elites. I mean, for God's sakes, I might be in the top 20%, and I'm the nobody, Jesus. But Jay Nock, he wrote a book called Our Enemy the State, and I haven't read that book, but I looked it up, and I think that's a book I probably should have. It's a powerful title for sure, and it seems like with the kind of philosophy that may have influenced Murray Rothbard and Ayn Rand. Like, Our Enemy the State is 1935, I believe. So I don't think Jay Nock would be happy to see his name thrown in among the rest, is what I'm trying to say. Anyway, let's continue. About a decade ago, I stopped by the desk of a young man named James Hitchcock, who was then my brilliant and generally wonderful editorial assistant at the Times. The Revolt of the Elites was lying on his desk. How odd, I thought, that James would be reading a 20-year-old book of social criticism. I failed to see this for the early warning it was. James is now a speechwriter for Vans. Influencers behind the scenes, the real kingmakers. Interesting piece of information he includes here. The vice president channels a lash, and millions of Americans who have never heard of the late historian resonate with the critique he laid out 30 years ago. With his intuitive genius for recognizing what will inflame and divide, Trump has deepened the Lashian critique by repeatedly telling people that their democracy has been usurped by a permanent ruling class of educated elites. Every day he launches initiatives to remind people that he is waging an existential class struggle, communist terminology, existential class struggle on their behalf against the elites. Trump against Harvard, Trump against the Washington bureaucrats, Trump against the law firms, Trump against the mainstream media, Trump against the bourgeoisie. I added that one, right? This whole thing about the permanent ruling class of educated elites, I completely agree with this assessment that he's making. And it's a complete hatchet job. It's a misidentification, it's a misattribution of who the elites really are. Their elite, that like Trump's elite and Christopher Lash's elite, is like Democrat bureaucracy, college professors. According to Lash, it's the top 25%. This is a classic technique to misdirect, to throw that bag of money. You just stole a bag of money from the bank, and you're gonna throw that bag of money at the street criminal on the corner, on the smaller criminal, have him take the fall for it. Historically, this has been the Jewish people. The Jewish people always take the fall for it. It's the oldest trick in the book. You know, I'm not talking about Netanyahu. I'm talking about the Jewish people throughout history. It could be gypsies, right? But the gypsies, they're not that successful, so they don't take the fall for it. In some parts of the world, it's Christians that get persecuted. In others, it's Muslims. It's usually, whatever it is, it's a culture that sticks to themselves. They have their own identity, like an immigrant group within a larger nation. So what ends up happening when people's country gets fucked by international interest and the ruling class, everyone tells the Jewish people to get the fuck out. Like in communist Poland, while all this was going on in the 1970s, they actually deported a lot of Jewish people to Israel that were never there. They never wanted to leave. And they took their houses, they took their wealth, they took their money. The government confiscated it. You know? And meanwhile, the bankers are laughing with their little hats on, while the real Jews have gotten all of their homes taken. I hope I don't get accused of anti-Semitism by saying the word Jew as I'm speaking up for them in defense of these people that in my own country, you know, just a generation ago, there was still crusades against. So they got their little hats on, and the minorities, the bankers, you know, Bill Gates and Peter Thiel, whatever, they're laughing and they're collecting the money. And the deep state is supposed to be the enemy. What a joke that is. What is deep state supposed to mean? It already narrows the scope to not include the real puppet masters. The real puppet masters are not deep state. They're not shallow state. They're not mid state. They're above state. They're way, way, way above states. They're outside the jurisdiction of a state. You dumb fucks. You know? Let's keep going and finish up with this, right? I'm going to let you read along. This narrative has been persuasive to millions of Americans. Since Trump first declared his candidacy in 2015, some 1,400 American counties have moved in a more Republican direction, while fewer than 60 have moved in a more Democratic direction. Trump used this narrative to build a multiracial working-class coalition. A fifth of all Trump voters in 2024 were people of color. How can those who oppose Trumpism construct a more accurate and compelling narrative? The first step is to capitalize on the weaknesses at the core of the MAGA narrative. For 250 years, the American idea has been partially rooted in the notion that we are not like class-riven European nations. Agreed. Our ancestors left that behind to build a nation where all people would have a fair chance. Agreed. We rejected the politics of class conflict and built a country around social mobility. Agreed. The idea that the poor kid today could be the rich executive tomorrow. Yes, big thumbs up for me. It was a spiritual wind that drove the Americans irresistibly ahead from the beginning. Beautifully said, the Italian writer Luigi Barzini Jr. observed, and Abraham Lincoln declared, "I hold the value of life is to improve one's condition." Agree, the biggest spiritual statement ever made. It's up there in that top tier. It's just to make the world better, man. This gospel, correct to call it a gospel. This is spiritual, moral things we're talking about now, right? This isn't just political and economic America. America is a spiritual idea. This gospel of social mobility gives Americans a sense of purpose and direction. Again, spiritual and philosophical words. Social mobility also reduces class conflict, because where you are today is not necessarily where you'll be tomorrow. In other words, it's not social determinism. It's mobility, freedom, what creates life, what creates wealth, creates everything. The traditional American story is built on hope and possibility. The MAGA story is built on menace and threat. The traditional American story embraces risk. The MAGA story clings to security. I'm agreeing with this. For most Americans across our history, utopia has lain in the future. Woo! I missed that when I was skimming through it at first. I agree with this statement of the utopia lays in the future. For most Americans across our history, utopia has lain in the future. For Trumpian populists, utopia lies in the past. The traditional American mindset is premised on the possibility of limitless growth that can be widely shared. The populist mindset assumes that everything is a zero-sum competition. So, as I applaud this guy, okay, for how well he states this, here's the thing, and this is where I'm going to push back. Leftists shine when they're being oppressed. I feel like I'm seeing myself right now. I don't mean to look like I got my comfortable chair. I hope I'm not coming across as like arrogant just because I'm leaning back in my chair, but this is usually how I just sit. Like, this is how I am. I hope that is cool with you. Just letting you guys know, because I've always been sitting and do the show like this, and you may think that like that's who I am. It's really not. Like, this is more like it. And finally, the show's almost 2 hours long and I'm not even tired. It's because my thing is comfortable. Anyway, speaking of being comfortable, leftists shine when they're being oppressed. When they're down and out and thrown to the side and uncomfortable, they will rise up. They're going to fight for the people. They're going to muster up great courage. They're going to conjure up lots of energy, and they're going to conjure up a whole lot of will to tear down old structures. And this is why you're now seeing a whole lot of people, seemingly they couldn't put a sentence together 3 years ago. But now they're coming up in front of the microphone and they're very eloquent, driven. They make short statements, raising their grievances and what they need to do. They're not really sounding like idiots. They're sounding like reasonable people. They seem focused. Now that they've been galvanized by Donald Trump and the big evil empire, okay, it's like they found their brain now because they're the underdog now, right? Because they're not in control. Leftists are very good at that. And the following is true for conservatives too, but it's especially the left, especially for liberals. When they destroy the old system, when their revolution initially is successful, when they win their victory, and they take over at the steering wheel, they run out of answers. No direction. That's what happens with people. Everyone has the answers when they're the ones trying to rebel. Nobody has the answers of how to actually build the world they want. People just know how to complain. But this author, he's saying that the populist mindset, meaning the conservatives of today, they assume everything's a zero-sum competition, meaning what? Immigrants are taking the jobs, right? The other countries are taking the jobs, so we need to get the immigrants out so we can have more jobs for us. That's the idea. Zero-sum game. we can't help other people in the world. That don't be helping these other nations and other peoples, because that takes away from Americans. We should be helping Americans first. This idea, right? If you're hearing this, this is a lot of people think this way here. A lot of Polish people think this way. A lot of people in my family think this way. Shout out to anybody that may be watching this. You know it's true. You know I'm talking about you, and much love. This idea that the more somebody else profits, the more we lose over here. That's a zero-sum game, right? That's a very animalistic law of the jungle type of way, right? Two animals fighting over one piece of meat. So correctly, this author identifies this about Donald Trump and the MAGA movement. But when the liberals were in power, they still believe that Earth climate is zero-sum, that all the carbon emissions equal the death of the planet. Is that not a zero-sum game? They want to do away with cars and trucks because there's no room for cars and trucks at the same time as nature. It has to be one or the other. That's a zero-sum game. They believe the economy is zero-sum, like in the sense that if we don't level the economic playing field, if we have people making billions of dollars, then people will be starving over here. So if we don't have all these regulations and restrictions on business, then the big fish corporations will take over. Of course, the big fish corporations end up taking over anyway. And it's the small business owners who suffer, because that's what economic intervention does. So where's the limitless growth he's talking about when it comes to all these regulations? Because I'm sure this guy's a leftist. But then, of course, it's all about the greater good. Then it's different, because he's not actually a moral objectivist. It's easy to be a moral objectivist when you're the ones getting your rights violated, because the things that are going to be pertinent to you are going to be like simple things. Somebody's got a boot on your neck. Your agenda is going to look very sensible. Get the fucking boot off the neck. Make sure it doesn't happen again, right? But once you get out of your house and start looking at the problems in the world, then you start bending and twisting your moral objectivism, because you were never a moral objectivist in the first place, right? That's most people. Because these people are the same, this guy and Trump. It's just the authoritarian socialist within them, within these leftists, is dormant. As long as the socialist is in his revolutionary phase, he can be reasoned with. Once the revolution is accomplished, the authoritarian comes out. And to some degree, this is true the other way around. I remember before Trump won in 2016, the rhetoric was quite reasonable. It was down to earth. I talk about this, one of my most, darkest moments. I'm ashamed to admit it now, is what I mean. That when he won in 2016, I remember I was in the same bed. I was going to school the next day, and I was kind of happy, like, yes, he won. They tried to hold him down because I seen the guy appear on the Alex Jones show, and I thought it was for real. He was talking about things that are for real. Like, he was talking about doing away with the Federal Reserve at the time. He was talking about Ron Paul type of stuff. Then the idiot public votes you in, and then the stalling swindler game begins. How long can I drag these motherfuckers down the line before they find out that I was full of shit the whole time and they vote the next swindler in? See, in 2016, I was 20 years old. I think I got some excuse. I don't think you got any excuse when you're past 30. I think your 20s is long enough to realize the swindler game. And I'm talking motherfuckers who are over 50. Crazy. Anyway, let's finish this up, because I'm starting to get a sore throat. I'm talking too long. Jeez. The story Trump tells isn't truly American. In fact, his story is the one that Russian nationalists tell. The good people of the heartland are under threat from foreigners and urban modernizers. I will protect you. If the representative American images were once the covered wagon or the car, today's representative MAGA image is a wall. Americans will eventually reject MAGA, not only because it's like a foreign implant in the body politic, but also because over time it will become clear that Trump's ethos doesn't address the real problems plaguing his working class supporters. Poor health outcomes, poor educational outcomes, low levels of social capital, low levels of investment in their communities, and weak economic growth. The Trumpists focus on their civil war against the elites, hurting Harvard, hurting USAID, hurting the National Institutes of Health. Hey, when I said that about RFK, RFK would be right here, National Institutes of Health, USAID, I mentioned Elon Musk and government efficiency, and the colleges with Harvard. Those are literally the three things I pointed out. It's before I read this article that I was thinking that. So I don't know if I'm if I'm more impressed with this guy for pointing it out or me for identifying it, right? Because yeah, it is cool to see, because I think I absolutely agree with him that his crusades, the things he addresses, those are the things, their little civil war, so to speak, right? Their revolution. Anyway, cutting off public broadcasting may be emotionally satisfying in an own the libs kind of a way, but how does this help the working class? Trump's biggest legislative achievement is a tax cut for the rich. How does that help the working class? The second task is to construct a vision of America that is more inspiring than MAGA's. Roughly 125 years ago, when the Declaration was half as old as it was now, America was struggling to cope with the Industrial Revolution, struggling to cope with it, I should say. The 1880s witnessed the vicious depression of 1882 to 85, massive political corruption, astounding concentrations of corporate power, huge inequality, and lynchings and other racial terrorism. Americans responded by building the populist progressive movement. Now, I have a big issue with what he's saying here, but I'm going to read one more paragraph. Today, populists and progressives generally occupy opposing political parties. But as Richard Hofstadter noted in his classic The Age of Reform, at the turn of the 20th century, populists and progressives formed an alliance. The progressives of that era, then as now, were concentrated in the highly educated neighborhoods of the big cities. The populists, then as now, were concentrated in the smaller towns of the Midwest and the South, but both the progressives and the populists wanted to help those who were being ground down by industrialization. Both emphasized moral reform, personal responsibility, and character formation. This stuff he's talking about, these are the human values I'm talking about. Moral reform, personal responsibility, and character formation. What's the last time you've even heard someone say that? To even talk about character and to say the word moral that many times. You know, seriously, this article is... I obviously don't agree with everything. I'm about to break it down, but still, I like this. Both believed in using government to reduce inequality and expand opportunity. Populists and progressives worked hard to keep rural and urban insurgencies in harmony. Together they built big things: the antitrust movement, the FDA, the Forest Service, the Federal Reserve. Bullshit revisionist history. That's what he said. Okay? He's saying those are the things that they built, the antitrust movement. Here's what happened, what really happened. In the 1800s, the ruling class was working overtime to deal with the explosive growth of true human potential. This populist progressive movement he talks about, it's not anything to put a name on. This is just natural human progress. People made use of the potential of the late 1800s, the idea that they could make a living and actually make money and have their own thing. And they also dealt with the challenges. Working fucking 16 hours, no safety net, nothing, no help, nothing, no culture that was going to protect you. Just, if you can make it, you survive. If you don't, you don't. So the ruling class was really struggling then, because America was already a free country at this time, and you had the Industrial Revolution that was actually going to bring freedom, economic freedom, like power of resources to the people. So they're shitting their pants, because feudalism is like done for. We're not going back to the way that we are. So you got people getting together in cities. Yeah, they had to work 16 hours a day in a factory, but they at least had the chance to meet someone in that city, and somebody that they would have never met on the farm. Then running water and modern plumbing. People weren't fucking dying at 35. They could actually have children and reasonably expect them to live past 18 months old. Fuck, I mean, people try to talk shit about the Industrial Revolution. It's like, I wonder if they would have lasted a day in life before, you know? Long story short, the ruling class had to scramble to try to maintain their place of power because the world was about to change and there was no holding back the economic and social progress that was a result of that moral and spiritual progress of the centuries before. So what the ruling class did is they used the energy of liberty and activism and progress, and they begun in the late 1800s. It was actually begun at that point because they were always working on this, but at that point this steady mission to just ride out that wave of the spirit of freedom, just hold on, ride it out, and they're going to slowly bring humanity back down to their knees, and they have. So the authoritarian forces, they were able to take back control, starting with the antitrust movement. The antitrust movement was supposed to be anti-monopoly, but it actually is anti-consumer. It wasn't actually helping them. It wasn't just against big corporations. It was the first domino in interventions in the economy by the government and them destroying the whole money system. The FDA, Food and Drug Administration, control over the food supply. Very simple, controlling the most basic things. Which, by the way, created a monopoly over food, right? The FDA has a monopoly over food in this country. A ridiculous thing, one of the most egregious things. That somebody actually goes and has to approve what you can eat and what you can sell. People can't sell supplements because they'll go to jail. There are people that are in jail for the stuff that they've done. Like Kevin Trudeau wrote the book Natural Cures, I believe is his name. People like that, you know. There's a Polish doctor that had to, I think he did end up going to jail because he had a cancer treatment that was actually working. Okay, it wasn't approved, so they locked him up. The Forest Service, that's control over land. It led over time to this government control over all this public land. The government owns all the land. If you're paying a property tax, you don't own the property, you know? And then the Federal Reserve, of course, the control over the money supply. These are not reforms. These are controls. See, we're halfway through the article now, and only now the snake starts to show his true colors in this article, but let's keep reading. It's really close to the end, but it looks like it's halfway down the page. So, populists and progressives needed each other and still do. Without populists, progressives can turn into a bunch of affluent, out-of-touch urbanites who have little in common with regular Americans. Without progressives, populists can turn into anti-intellectual, paranoid bigots. The progressive valorizing of cultural diversity is balanced by populist emphasis on cultural cohesion. Americans of the populist era were struggling to cope with the rise of the industrial age. Today they are struggling to cope with the rise of the information age. Then, as now, we are trying to adapt traditional American ideals to novel circumstances. The wisdom that drove the populists and progressives can serve as a useful guide for today. The populist progressive movement made social mobility, the American dream, the core of its vision, and it launched a crusade against concentration of corporate power that was crushing economic and social mobility. The populists and progressives of that era also intuited something that psychological research would validate decades later. If people are to thrive and take productive risks, they need secure foundations from which to operate. Populists are good at thinking how to build a secure container. A stable family, safe neighborhoods, strong national borders, shared moral values. I'm surprised to even read this. This is true. This is what the conservatives have right. The family. Progressives are good at using government to widen opportunity, expanding educational opportunities, using industrial policy to invest in areas left behind. That's a weird way to spell socialism, right? Anyway, building housing so that people can move from one place to another. Both populists and progressives have an interest in reforming the institutions that the Americans have lost faith in. Universities, Congress, corporations, the meritocracy, the Silicon Valley technocracy. he talked about what populists and progressives are good at. And even though I've talked shit about this author and picked apart his article to some degree, this is one of the best things I've read in a long time, seriously. The way he frames these two forces with the proper context, seriously, I'm really impressed with this. But the strength of these two sides that he talks about, they're good at, progressives are good at using government to widen opportunity. Populists are good at thinking how to build a secure container. They claim to be good at that. They're not actually good at that. What they are truly good at, those two parties, as I've said, is to give the solutions if they were given a chance. Like a job interview. Like, they're really good at the job interview. They'll tell you exactly what they'll do if you just give them the chance. And you hire them, and when they get the chance, their solutions don't work. Because it's easy to talk shit about the boss. It's not that easy to be the boss. And being the boss, in a worldview, planetary sense, is knowing this philosophy, the values, the principles, living your life by it, being an activist and a teacher to share it with others, and at the same time of doing all that, being a warrior ready to physically kill and die at any given moment for that. That's what it actually takes. That's the real solution. Neither populists or progressives have any people like that in their ranks. Both populists and progressives have an interest in reforming the institutions that Americans have lost faith in: universities, Congress, corporations, the meritocracy, the Silicon Valley technocracy. This is what he says. It's restoring faith in institutions, and I've talked about it before. This was the true mission of the Trojan horse that is Donald Trump. He's restored certain institutions: military, church, police, and business, in some ways. It's a revival of those. Now, the counter movement, they're going to seek to restore faith in institutions as well, but different ones: education, science, think tanks, politician, social justice type of stuff, progressive stuff, those kind of institutions, because that's who shit the bed during COVID-19. That's how this worked. They really took a bad shot in the PR sense. So there's a rubber match, right? A springboard reactions, and what both sides are doing is they're just reeling the people back in, so they believe in government one way or another. All those good old institutions, they look real ugly then during the pandemic. Well, this is their redemption story. Thanks to big bad Trump. Thanks to Trump, they're going to be able to redeem themselves. Like a good wrestling heel, Donald Trump is, who can make people root against him so much that they're going to fill the stadium for a guy that would have been a clown in any other circumstances. But they cheer, they'll throw the babies in the air, as Jim Cornette would say, for them when you got a good wrestling heel, a good bad guy to galvanize all the people for it. And whoever their guy is, the baby face, they'll back him to the end. And all Donald Trump is, he's the Iron Sheik to America's next Hulk Hogan. And for those that know, that's exactly what it is. Let's finish this up. The old populist progressive alliance was economically left, socially center right, and hell-bent on reform. A contemporary version of this alliance would likely turn out to be the same. This has the benefit of scrambling outdated 20th century categories of left and right, and could help promote the notion that we are one nation, culturally cohesive, but economically and demographically diverse. It rejects the Trumpian idea that we are sentenced to an endless class or culture war. The third task, of course, is to actually build the movement around the vision. Social movements are bigger than political parties and are focused on more than just passing bills in Congress. They push for change on civic, cultural, institutional, and legislative fronts all at once. They change the climate of the age. Successful social movements find ways to build civic power. Authoritarians seek to divide and isolate their opponents to prevent collective action. So the mere act of organizing a coalition creates power. Individuals may be powerless, but groups are not. That's a fatal mistake of a statement. Individuals are not powerless. Clearly not, or else Donald Trump would have never been a thing. Authoritarians don't just seek to prevent collective action, they are collective action. Donald Trump is a cult of personality, but everything he does is collective action. And from the first or second paragraph when we started this, the author talked about selfish impulses. He again exposes the gap in his mind. He, like most of Trump's opponents, sees the group as good inherently, and the individual as potentially good, but inherently dangerous. And you could say that it's interesting to think about how MAGA sees it, right? How the other side sees it. But how I see it is both the group and the individual are potentially good and potentially dangerous. They're not inherently anything. And it takes both collective and individual action to advance life. It takes both at the same time. Successful movements are microcosms of the society they hope to create. They should be. I agree. An anti-MAGA movement would have to be a cross-class movement, one that joined members of the educated class with members of the working class. We talked about that. That's true. That's what brought down communism in Poland. Shrinking the social chasms that gave rise to populism in the first place. Successful movements mobilize the people who already agree with them, but they also focus on persuading those who don't. Occasionally you'll hear a Democratic politician say they're going to fight for their side. Much of the time that just means that the politician is going to say what their base already believes, only at a higher volume. That's mostly useless. Large anti-Trump rallies attended exclusively by NPR listeners in blue cities do not impress rural voters. Successful movements create civic power by increasing social tension through marches, bus boycotts, and lunch counter sit-ins. The civil rights movement created tension that threw sand in the gears of white supremacy. Saul Alinsky, the influential community organizer, used to argue that power is not what you have, it's what your opponents think you have. In the 2010s, the Tea Party movement, though small in numbers, ratcheted up the tension on establishment Republicans, convincing them that resisting Tea Party goals would be costly. And here he's talking about leverage. He's talking about negotiations and will, and actually forcing the systems to back down, but while also being smart enough to not alienate those that are on the fence. It's a very high level of awareness from this person, you know? See, when I was reading this, I did not see this image. So, as we get to the end of this article, a successful anti-MAGA movement must start by winning some achievable concrete victory, halting this specific attack on democracy or that specific Trump program, and building from there. It must bring people from fear and stasis to hope and momentum. Imagine that. After writing all that writing, he makes this point, that the solution is to win, is to actually achieve some kind of a victory and go from there, in his own words. I actually thought this was the end of the article, because I didn't see the picture because I was reading the archived version that didn't have it loaded. So for me, it ended here. So I thought this was the end of the article, and I thought it was a great end to the article. It would be like very powerful. It's like a cliffhanger, almost a cliffhanger. Like he's not gonna go into the typical ending and give you a comfortable ending where you can expect the ending and the climax. This actually demonstrates the idea of the paragraph before, like about creating social tension to create change, make the other side uncomfortable. And for us and all of you watching the show, how powerful would it be if we were to listen to that message and put it into practice? Just to win some achievable concrete victory. Not just talking about these things, but making something, bringing something into the world and starting from there. See, how do you stop the downward slide of defeat that humanity's on? I know something about that because I've been in addiction and alcoholism. That used to be me. I know what a downward slide is. It just keeps building, like breeding more and more failure. Well, as far as, somebody who's stopped these cycles, I don't really know how. You just have to start to win somehow. And every time you do win, you start the snowball effect of winning, and then you win more. You just keep winning on top of winning. Not to sound like Charlie Sheen here, but it's just winning. Obviously, you play to win the game, like Herman Edwards said in this speech. I'm on a roll with these, man. I even dug up Jar Jar Binks, but the advice. And by the way, this article, I am gonna end this article here. I don't care if he's got more to write. This is the last paragraph, because this is the message that we need to leave this show with, show 150. It's a big milestone for me. And the message that I take away from this is, do what you said you were going to do. Just win some victory. Actually give us something, not just what you're going to do. Just do something. Write the article that you said you were going to write. Do what you said you were going to do. Maybe take the risks to go out of your comfort zone and to try to find victory where you haven't looked for it before. So I decided to do the same, and I'm going to cut it right there and actually not. I'm sorry for disrespecting the author and featuring his article without finishing it up, but this is the last paragraph. That's it. And believe it or not, I actually didn't finish reading it, and I didn't look the author up, although I was very impressed with it. So I thank David Brooks, whoever you are, for that article. I did see the editor's note at the top that said this article is part of the Unfinished Revolution, a project exploring 250 years of the American experiment. I'll actually scroll up to it so you could see it. Right, David Brooks is the author. Editor's note right here. The Unfinished Revolution. Well, the Unfinished Revolution is a clear reference to the pyramid without a capstone. Someone at the Atlantic knows what they're doing. And I think, oh yeah, it's called the Atlantic, which is not only the bridge between the old and new world, it's the ocean between Europe and America. It's also a reference to Atlantis, which is what the unfinished pyramid is a symbol of, because they lost civilization, right? And those aspiring to all these things, and they did things that we can't imagine of today, the lost historical utopia. That's the obsession of modern man, the lost historical utopia. And man himself is lost. People have nostalgia of a better world, but no game plan for how to build it. Our enemies, they know how to build it, but it's easy for them because they are only copying the structures that were already here. Like if you imagine if the pyramid was around before the flood, and after the flood somebody comes up and sees it and they see this big pyramid standing there from the old civilization, you can just copy it. Well, actually you can't, right? But you can replicate it. You can recreate the old structures, and that's what the ruling class does. They have replicated the structures that have always been here for as long as humanity has been here. This is why history repeats itself, and really psychologically it's because of trauma cycles that keep repeating themselves. It's all moral and psychological. They got the blueprint. We got the nostalgia for a better life, but we don't have the blueprint. I represent all the people who have the emotional memory or the imagination for a better world, but also the game plan for how to build it. And those people are the artists, so to speak, the artists, the creators, but also laborers. You got to have the idea, you got to have the vision of what this is supposed to be like and sound like and feel like. But then you got to be able to put your hands dirty and actually make the shit. And if you get a strong enough resistance, you got to force it to happen. We're talking about people like that. That's who it will take. And there are not that many people like that. But if you're hearing me this far in, 2 hours and 13 minutes in, the longest this week in Tyranny ever. If you're hearing me this far in, it's probably because you are an artist too. You're probably just like me. So I've done my thing now. You go ahead and do your thing. And as they say, as Z-Money says, pop your shit. Thank you, and I'll see you next week on This Week in Tyranny.